My daughter, Chloe, leaned back against my dining room table, holding a sleek designer pen in one hand and a stack of legal documents in the other, her tone laced with practiced, gentle condescension. "Dad, let's be realistic for once. You don't need this house anymore. It's 4 bedrooms, 2 stories, and completely impractical for a 68-year-old man living alone. We've already picked out a wonderful senior suite at Oak Ridge, and Greg and I have signed the preliminary listing agreement with a top real estate agent. All we need is your signature right here." I sat across from her, my worn hands folded over the dark mahogany surface I had spent 3 months sanding and varnishing by hand 30 years ago. I looked at Greg, my son-in-law, who stood near the bay window, pretending to admire the garden, though his eyes kept darting toward his phone, checking stock tickers and property valuation apps. "A senior suite, Chloe?" I asked softly, keeping my voice flat, steady, and unreadable. "You've already spoken to a listing agent without asking me?" Chloe offered a warm, rehearsed smile, the kind she used on her high-end real estate clients when she was trying to close a difficult deal. "Dad, we're doing this because we love you. Maintaining 4 acres, paying these property taxes, taking care of the roof, it's draining your savings. You've been forgetting small things lately, like leaving the front porch light on during the day or missing Sunday dinners. It's time to let us handle the heavy lifting. We're taking control of the house for your own good." Greg turned from the window, clearing his throat with fake authority. "We've already got a cash offer lined up, Arthur. A developer wants the land. They're offering top dollar, well above market value, provided we transfer the deed to Chloe under power of attorney by the end of the month. It's a win-win. You get a low-maintenance apartment, and the family equity is preserved." I looked at my daughter's bright, ambitious eyes, and then at Greg's restless posture. They thought they were holding all the cards. They thought they were standing in a home that belonged to an old, confused man who was easily swayed by fast talk and legal jargon. What Chloe didn't know, what neither of them could possibly fathom, was that I had already sold the house 3 weeks ago. "Leave the papers on the table, Chloe," I said quietly, standing up to clear my tea mug. "I'll review them tonight." Chloe sighed, exchanging a satisfied, knowing look with Greg. She genuinely believed my quiet compliance was the first stage of surrender. "Don't take too long, Dad. The buyer's offer expires on Friday. We'll come back then to pick up the signed documents and help you start clearing out Mom's old things." As their luxury SUV pulled out of my gravel driveway, throwing small stones against the oak trees my late wife Martha and I had planted when Chloe was just 4 years old, I stood in the kitchen window and watched them go. My mind drifted back 6 months to the day this quiet war truly began. After Martha passed away 3 years ago, this house became my sanctuary. Every room held a piece of our story. The height marks etched into the kitchen doorframe tracking Chloe's growth, the handmade cedar cabinets in the pantry, the workshop where I spent 40 years running my custom cabinetry business. I wasn't rich, but through decades of 70-hour work weeks, disciplined savings, and sweat equity, I had built a property worth well over $1 million, completely debt-free. Chloe had always been driven, but over the last year, her financial life had taken a sharp, desperate turn. She and Greg had bought a sprawling mansion in an exclusive gated community, taken out massive loans to fund a lavish lifestyle, and invested heavily in Greg's commercial tech startup. At first, the signs of their betrayal were subtle. Chloe began showing up unannounced, asking probing questions about my bank accounts, my pension, and where I kept the physical property deeds. Then came the small, sinister manipulations. She would hide my reading glasses in strange drawers and then exclaim, "Oh, Dad, you're losing track of things again." She once subtly changed the thermostat settings to freezing cold while I was in the yard, only to gently scold me later about how I couldn't remember how to operate the house controls. They were building a psychological case against me,
not just to convince themselves, but to convince doctors, banks, and judges that Arthur Vance was slipping into severe dementia and needed a legal guardian to take over his estate. The turning point came 2 months ago during a family dinner. Chloe's younger brother, Ryan, had flown in from Seattle. Ryan was a quiet, gentle soul, an architect who had never cared about wealth or status. During dinner, Chloe casually brought up the idea of consolidating Dad's assets into a joint family account managed exclusively by her and Greg. Ryan immediately balked. "Why would Dad need to consolidate anything, Chloe? His mind is sharper than yours. He still manages his own taxes and builds custom furniture in the shed." Chloe's eyes had flashed with a cold, terrifying anger that night. "You don't live here, Ryan. You don't see how he struggles. He's sitting on millions in equity while his health declines. It's irresponsible to leave him in charge of this property." That night, after Ryan left for the airport, I went down to my basement office and unlocked my steel filing cabinet. I pulled out my bank statements and discovered something that made my blood run cold. Small, precise automatic transfers, $500 here, $1,000 there, had been leaving my secondary account for nearly 8 months. The total was over $14,000. Chloe had obtained a secondary card on my account years ago during Martha's illness to help buy groceries, and she had been quietly draining it ever since, assuming I would never notice. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just about the money. It was the realization that my own daughter looked at me not as a father who had sacrificed everything for her, but as an obstacle standing between her and a massive payday. I knew I couldn't fight them with screaming matches or emotional pleas. If I fought back aggressively, Chloe would use my anger as proof of elderly agitation and paranoia to fast-track an emergency court conservatorship. I needed to be patient. I needed to play the exact role she had written for me, a slow, passive, fading old man. The next morning, I called my lifelong friend, Frank Henderson. Frank was a retired estate attorney who had known Martha and me since high school. We met at a quiet diner 2 towns over, away from prying eyes. "Arthur," Frank said, after reviewing the bank records and hearing about Chloe's psychological games, his face grave and troubled, "they're setting up a trap. Chloe is a licensed real estate broker. She knows how to navigate title transfers and power of attorney clauses. If she files for emergency temporary guardianship using a paid medical assessment, she can freeze your access to the deed before you even get a court date." "What are my options, Frank?" I asked, my hands steady around my coffee cup despite the storm raging in my chest.
Frank leaned in, lowering his voice. "If you try to lock the house in a trust now, she can contest it in court, claiming you lacked mental capacity when you signed the documents. But there is one thing she cannot contest: a direct, arm's-length sale of the property while you are still the sole legal owner on record." Sell the house? The words felt like lead in my mouth. Sell Martha's home? "Listen to me, Arthur," Frank said gently. "There is a non-profit foundation, the St. Jude Children's Land Conservancy. They buy historic properties and old family farms, preserve the natural land forever, and turn the main structures into sanctuary housing for families of pediatric cancer patients undergoing long-term treatment at the regional hospital. They've been looking for a property exactly like yours for 2 years." I sat in silence as the weight of Frank's words washed over me. Selling the house meant leaving behind 40 years of memories. It meant letting go of the physical walls I had poured my life into. But as I thought about Chloe's fake smiles, Greg's calculating glances, and the insidious way they were trying to erase my dignity, a sudden profound clarity settled over my soul. A home isn't just wood and bricks. It's the love and honor you build inside it. Chloe and Greg wanted to turn my life's work into a bulldozed suburban subdivision to fund their greedy debts.
turning it into a place of hope and healing for sick children and their desperate parents, was something Martha would have wept for with joy. "How fast can they close, Frank?" I asked softly. "They have liquid donor capital ready. If you agree to a life estate clause, you can sell the deed immediately at full market value, $1.4 million, cash. The deed transfers to the foundation, but the life estate clause grants you the absolute legal right to live in the house for the rest of your life, rent-free, completely untouchable by anyone else, not even your children." "And the money from the sale?" "It gets wired directly into an irrevocable third-party managed trust. Upon your passing, or whenever you choose, the funds are distributed according to your explicit instructions. Chloe won't be able to touch a single penny, nor will she ever be able to sell or develop this land." For 3 weeks, I worked in complete secrecy with Frank and the Foundation's legal team. I underwent 2 comprehensive video-recorded neurological evaluations by top independent board-certified psychiatrists at the State University Hospital, certifying beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was in perfect mental health. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, 10 days before Chloe brought her listing agreement to my dining room, I signed the final closing documents. The deed to my 4 acres was officially registered in the county clerk's office under the ownership of the Conservancy. The $1.4 million was safely deposited into the independent trust. And through it all, I kept my mouth shut. I played the quiet, forgetful old man. I let Chloe believe her plan was moving forward flawlessly. 2 days after Chloe left the listing documents on my table, my phone rang. It was Ryan. "Dad," Ryan said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I just got a call from Chloe. She told me she's filing the petition for power of attorney on Friday afternoon. She said you've completely deteriorated and that Greg found a buyer who's willing to pay cash for the lot. Dad, tell me she's lying. Tell me you didn't agree to this."
"I didn't agree to anything, Ryan," I said gently. "Are you coming down this weekend?" "I'm on a plane tomorrow morning," Ryan said fiercely. "I won't let her do this to you, Dad. I don't care if she's my sister. What she's doing is cruel." "Thank you, son," I murmured, feeling a warm spark of hope in my chest. At least one of my children still had a heart. "Come to the house on Friday at 3 o'clock. Chloe and Greg will be here too. It's time we brought this whole affair to a close." Friday afternoon arrived with a cold, gray sky and a bitter wind that rustled the dry leaves across the driveway. Ryan arrived first at 2:30. He sat with me at the kitchen table, his knuckles white as he looked over the fake listing papers Chloe had left behind. "This is insane, Dad," he said, shaking his head. "She's listed the sale price at $800,000, nearly $400,000 below market value. Why would she sell it so cheap?" "Because Greg's buyer is a dummy LLC owned by Greg's business partner," I revealed quietly. "They were going to buy it cheap from my estate using Chloe's power of attorney, flip it to a major developer for $1.5 million, and pocket the $700,000 difference directly into their personal accounts before you or I ever realized what happened." Ryan stared in absolute horror, his mouth agape. They were stealing from their own family? Before Ryan could respond, the sound of 2 cars pulling up the driveway cut through the silence. Chloe and Greg got out of their luxury SUV, followed closely by a sharp-dressed man in a tailored suit carrying a leather briefcase, their chosen notary and real estate attorney. They walked into the house without knocking, Chloe's high heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "Ryan," Chloe said, stopping short when she saw her brother standing beside me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I didn't expect you here today. This is a private family administrative matter." "It's my family too, Chloe," Ryan said, stepping forward, his voice tight with anger. "And I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to force Dad out of his own home."
Greg scoffed, walking past Ryan toward the dining table. "Don't be dramatic, Ryan. Arthur's health is declining. We're doing what's necessary to secure his future. Arthur, did you sign the power of attorney and the listing agreement?" I sat quietly at the head of the table. "I haven't signed anything, Greg." Chloe took a deep breath, putting on her stern, motherly expression. "Dad, we don't have time for games today. Mr. Vance, our attorney, is here to notarize the signatures. The developer's earnest deposit is already in escrow. If you refuse to sign today, we will go straight to the county courthouse with Dr. Mercer's affidavit regarding your cognitive decline and file for emergency guardianship. It will be public, it will be embarrassing, and you will lose control anyway. Please just sign the papers." Mr. Vance, their attorney, stepped forward, opening his leather portfolio and laying a fresh set of legal documents in front of me, pointing to the yellow signature tabs. "Mr. Vance, as your daughter's counsel, I strongly advise you to execute these documents voluntarily. It is in everyone's best interest." I looked at the documents, then at Chloe, and finally at Greg. There was no hatred in my heart, only a deep, lingering sadness for the person my daughter had become. "Chloe," I said softly, "do you remember when you were 8 years old and you fell off the tire swing out by the old oak tree?" Chloe blinked, taken aback by the sudden change of subject. "What, Dad? What does that have to do with anything?" "You broke your arm," I continued, my voice steady and quiet. "I carried you 3 miles through the woods to the main road because my truck had a flat tire. I held your hand in the emergency room all night, telling you that as long as I was alive, nothing in this world would ever hurt you." Chloe's posture stiffened slightly, a momentary flicker of guilt washing across her features before her face hardened once more. "Dad, that was 30 years ago. Times change. People get old. We have to make practical decisions."
Yes, I agreed quietly. We do. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a thick white envelope, and laid it gently on top of their unsigned listing agreement. "What is that?" Greg asked suspiciously. "That," I said, looking Greg straight in the eyes, "is a certified copy of the registered property title from the County Land Records Office, executed 3 weeks ago." Greg frowned, stepping forward to snatch the envelope. He pulled out the official deed and began scanning the legal text. As Chloe stepped up beside him, her eyes tracing the lines of fine print. As they read, the atmosphere in the dining room underwent a terrifying, suffocating shift. The color drained from Greg's face so fast he looked as though he might faint. Chloe's breath hitched in her throat, her hand flying to her mouth. This is a mistake," Chloe stammered, her voice suddenly high and frantic. "This deed says the owner of this property is the St. Jude Children's Land Conservancy?" "That is correct," I said calmly. "No!" Greg roared, slamming his hand down on the table. "You can't sell this house. We have a listing agreement. We have a buyer. Who authorized this?" "I did," I replied, standing up to my full height, looking down at both of them. "As the sole legal owner of this property, I sold the entire 4 acres and the house to the foundation 3 weeks ago for $1.4 million cash." $1.4 million! Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking with pure hysteria. "Where is the money, Dad? Where is the money?" The full purchase amount was transferred directly into an irrevocable, third-party managed educational and charitable trust, I said quietly. "It is completely outside of my personal estate. Upon my passing, 50% of the trust will fund medical treatment for pediatric cancer patients, and the remaining 50% will be held in a restricted education trust for my grandchildren's college tuition, managed exclusively by your brother, Ryan." Chloe stumbled back against the sideboard, her eyes wide with unadulterated shock and fury. You gave it away? You gave away our inheritance to a charity?" "It was never your inheritance, Chloe," Ryan interjected fiercely, stepping between me and Chloe. It was Dad's life's work. He built it, he owned it, and he had every right to decide what happened to it. "You senile old fool!" Greg exploded, stepping toward me with a raised finger, his professional composure completely shattered. "We've spent months setting up this deal. We owe over $200,000 to creditors. If we don't close this land sale by next week, my company goes into receivership." "I know about your debts, Greg, and I know about the $14,000 Chloe secretly stolen from my secondary bank account over the last 8 months. Chloe froze, her face flushing bright red with sudden, overwhelming shame. She looked at Ryan, then at her attorney, who was already quietly closing his briefcase, recognizing that his clients had lost completely and that any further action would expose them to criminal fraud investigations. "Dad," Chloe whispered, tears finally welling in her eyes, not tears of repentance, but tears of bitter defeat. How could you do this to me? I'm your daughter." "And I was your father," I said, my voice heavy with a heartbreak that ran deeper than any financial loss. "I would have helped you, Chloe, if you had come to me with honesty, if you had told me you were drowning in debt and needed help, I would have given you everything I could spare. But you didn't come to me with honesty. You came into my home, tried to make me feel insane, and planned to throw me into an institution so you could rob me blind."
I walked over to the front door and pulled it wide open, letting the cold autumn wind sweep through the hallway. "Your attorney knows the law, Chloe," I said, looking at Mr. Vance, who gave me a respectful, solemn nod before heading toward the exit. "The foundation granted me a lifetime estate clause. I have the legal right to live in this house until the day I die. But you and Greg no longer have permission to set foot on this land. If you return, you will be trespassing." Greg glared at me with pure venom, muttering a string of curses under his breath as he grabbed his coat and stormed out toward his car. Chloe stood in the middle of the dining room for a long, silent moment. She looked at the handmade mahogany table, at the kitchen door frame where her childhood height marks were still visible, and finally at me. For a second, I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to hold my hand in the woods, but it was quickly replaced by the cold wall of her ruined pride. Without another word, she turned and walked out the door, her high heels clicking hollowly on the porch before disappearing into the fading light of the evening. Ryan and I stood together on the porch, watching their car speed down the driveway, its red taillights fading into the gloom of the surrounding woods. "Are you going to be okay, Dad?" Ryan asked softly, placing a warm, supportive hand on my shoulder. "I'm going to be fine, Ryan," I said, taking a deep, clean breath of the crisp evening air. "Better than fine." After Ryan left later that evening to return to his hotel, a deep, unbroken quiet settled over the house. I didn't turn on the television or light the bright kitchen lamps. I walked into the living room, poured myself a cup of hot chamomile tea, and sat down in my old armchair by the fireplace. I looked at the framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a picture of Martha sitting on the front porch, laughing as a young Chloe and Ryan chased fireflies across the lawn in the warm summer dusk. I picked up the photo, tracing the glass over Martha's face. The house was sold. The land was safe forever. In a few months, construction would begin on the small garden pavilions out back, where sick children and their mothers could sit in the sunshine and find a moment of peace amidst their pain. My grandchildren's futures were secured, protected from their parents' greed. I had saved my dignity. I had protected my legacy. But as I sat alone in the quiet shadows of the room we had built together, Watching the firelight dance across the dark wood, a single tear slipped down my face and dripped onto the glass frame. I had kept my home, but the family I spent my life building was gone, and no amount of land or money would ever fill the empty space they left behind.